The pandemic has kept teenagers across the world out of school. In some places, this has had devastating consequences. The number of teen pregnancies has been soaring. At least 1 million more underage girls have become pregnant since the pandemic began, most in developing countries, many of them victims of sexual abuse. Welcome to the COVID-19 special. I'm Rebecca Ritters. Uganda is among those countries that have seen a spike in teenage pregnancies since schools were shut due to the pandemic. Rights groups warn that lockdowns have exposed girls who would otherwise have been in class to sexual exploitation and abuse.
Viola Echicho is 17 years old and already has a baby. She was a student in eastern Uganda until schools closed last year to stop the spread of COVID-19. Viola returned home and then got pregnant.
I was afraid. My mum was so angry with me. I ran away from home but returned later.
While her school remained closed, Viola helped her mother run a restaurant. That's where she met the man who impregnated her. Viola's mother says that her daughter was safe in school.
If the schools hadn't closed, she wouldn't have gotten pregnant. That's a fact.
This is Viola's school. Like all schools across the country, it remains closed and abandoned. The teachers here are worried that the more their students are kept from school, the more these teenagers are exposed to abuse.
During this time at home, kids have learned things that we didn't know about at their age. Remember, this is a digital age where children watch pornography on phones and try out stuff. Even the churches that would have helped the children remain closed. So many kids are largely on their own.
According to government figures before the pandemic, 1 out of 4 adolescent girls fell pregnant in Uganda. This has grown to nearly 1 in 3 girls in some villages. The UNFPA also blames the growth in teenage pregnancies on rising poverty.
If like a girl doesn't have money to buy pads, for example, and there's someone who can provide some money for the pad, then they find that they are vulnerable. Those who are poor, they tend to marry off the girls. It's like a business. The moment they marry off the girls, definitely then they get the bride price in terms of animals, in terms of money.
In Uganda, sex with a minor below the age of 18 is punishable with a maximum sentence of death. But the police say that prosecution is challenging. Victims are often compromised by cultural traditions, which mostly protect the male culprit.
We have a lot of cultural beliefs that are very harmful. Child marriage in some communities is allowed. People think some of these cases are not police matters. They don't even report them to police. They go, they sit with the LOC, they exchange gifts.
The government is now vaccinating teachers to fast-track the reopening of schools. Viola hopes to resume studies, but with a baby to take care of, learning may never be the same for the young mother.
Viola's story is far from an isolated case. The World Health Organization estimates there are some 10 million unwanted teenage pregnancies in the developing world each year. More than 5 million of those are aborted, with the vast majority of those procedures performed unsafely. Pregnancy and childbirth complications are the leading cause of death in girls aged between 15 and 19 worldwide. Well, for more on this, I'm joined on the line by Irene Kagoya from World Vision in Uganda. Irene, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program. Can you explain to us how COVID-19 has contributed so much to this increase in abuse and exploitation?
Thank you so much. The situation of violence against children in Uganda and many parts of Africa has been one that is difficult to deal with because cases of violence have been there even before COVID-19. But with the outbreak, the situation worsened. In as much as government put up measures to control the spread of the pandemic, unfortunately, these measures have indirectly affected the well-being of many children. For instance, the closures of schools have really impacted on children, especially the girl child. Schools served as a safety net for many girls, but now with schools closed, the girls cannot access information on their sexual and reproductive health. The girls are now spending more time with male friends and men in the communities, and yet when they were in school, they spent more time studying while at school. We also at school, they received guidance and counseling, which is not feasible anymore with the continued closure of schools, but also the economic hardships in many of the communities in Uganda and many parts of Africa due to the pandemic. We saw many families lose their livelihoods as a result of job loss. We saw children and families struggling really to earn a living during the lockdown. And as such, they're exposed to vulnerabilities. For instance, as you heard in the video, that even where someone cannot afford a pad, they become vulnerable to anyone who may want to take advantage of them. And we also saw lots of cases of gender-based violence happening in homes, which ultimately exposed them to more violence, including teenage pregnancy.
So clearly a lot of issues there and a lot of impacts on the girls. But what sort of physical impact does it have on these young women, on their bodies, having a child so early?
Honestly, for some people, they've called it one of the worst forms of child labor because when you look at this child, she's barely ready to carry a child. And we've had situations where they'll suffer complications right after birth or even during birth and resulting to death, like you have indicated in the report. But also one of the big challenges we have noticed with teenage pregnancy is the stigma that these girls suffer within the communities and within families. Some of these girls have been sent away by their parents, of course, disappointed, but like any other parent. So in cases where a parent is not able to support them, children have been left to the support of charitable organizations. And we've seen these girls ending up in the hands of other sort of societies that cannot support them. They end up on the streets trying to fend and survive. And in worst case scenarios, we've seen these girls suffer depression, where they expose themselves to alcoholism and drugs because they are frustrated that either their dreams have come to an end due to the teenage pregnancy.
Just a devastating situation. Irene Kagoya, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
You're welcome.
Well, now we come to the part of the show dedicated to your questions. Here to answer them is our correspondent, Derek Williams.
Does the vaccine give you different protection than recovering from the virus does?
This is complicated, but the short answer is yes. Both infection with the pathogen and being vaccinated against that pathogen generate protective immune responses, but they're different on a number of levels. How could they not be? During an infection through the nose and throat, the body is confronted with rapidly replicating SARS-CoV-2, while most vaccines injected in the arm work by only confronting the immune system with a critical coronavirus feature, the spike that studs its outer surface. Among other things, that means an infection provokes the body to produce a wider range of antibodies than vaccines will. The antibodies they prompt are more narrowly focused on the spike, but many experts think that narrow but powerful focus is a positive thing. Others think it could become a problem if the spike proteins mutate even further in new variants. But the truth is, we don't really know at this point which of the two, infection or vaccination, provides better or longer lasting protection. There are studies making that claim in both directions. But there are two important points touching on this topic that I think have to be made. The first is that we have good evidence that protection for people who have survived a COVID-19 infection can be dramatically strengthened if after recovery they go ahead and get vaccinated as well, which is why healthcare authorities recommend definitely doing that. The second point is that given the choice, being vaccinated is a much safer way to acquire protection from COVID-19 than getting the disease and surviving it. That might provide you with an excellent defensive response against SARS-CoV-2 in the future, but there's also a chance that you wouldn't live to enjoy it.
Most of New Zealand has moved out of lockdown, easing restrictions on Wednesday, except for the largest city, Auckland, which will remain in the strictest type of lockdown until at least next week. That city has been battling an outbreak of the Delta variant for the past month. New Zealand was largely virus-free until an infected traveller from Australia seeded the current outbreak. Well, that's our show for today. If you'd like more on any of our stories, you'll find that and much more on our website, dw.com/COVID-19. We'll be back again at the same time tomorrow. Hope to see you then. Thanks for watching.